Hey guys, it's Tony from Nerdy and 30 coming at you with another episode of the Movie Mouth. Um, this episode we're looking at A Quiet Place, which was written, directed, and starred John Krasinski and also his wife Emily Blunt, who also plays his wife in the movie. Now, A Quiet Place follows a family initially. I think it was 3 months after an apocalyptic event in which these creatures came to Earth. The movie never really describes how they got there, where they came from, and the creatures are attracted to sound and they attack based on sound, um, based on newspapers and clippings throughout the movie. You find out that it is a devastating event that wipes out most of the world's population. Um, so this family is a mother and a father, two sons and a daughter. Their daughter just happens to be, I don't want to say just happens to be, but she is deaf, and the family communicates through sign language, which explains why the family was able to survive, because they were already able to communicate without speaking. And I don't know if this is a spoiler or not, but they basically show you in the trailer that the youngest son uh, grabs a toy, creates sound, and is basically killed by the one of the creatures. They never actually show him getting killed, but they show the creature taking him away. And John Krasinski tries to save him in time, but they don't get to him in time. Now, the movie then explores, once again, like Hereditary that I reviewed the other day, explores the guilt of losing a child and how that affects a family. Now, this takes place in an apocalyptic scenario, whereas Hereditary took place with a supernatural twist to it. Um, and then you come to it flash forwards to about a year later, and Emily Blunt is pregnant. Looks about 9 months pregnant. She's about ready to give birth, and it follows the family in the aftermath of that. Now, I thought most of this movie is silent in the aspect of characters speaking to each other. They use sign language in their subtitles. It's not a silent film, obviously. There's the sound effects of what's happening around them, and there is an original score. It's not very distinct. I wouldn't say it's memorable either. I wouldn't say it's terrible. It's kind of just adequate, a little forgettable. Um, but for the most part, this movie works really well. Even as essentially a silent film, it has moments of exposition that got a little bit annoying. I'll get into one of them. But when you do this type of movie, you almost have to. I cite two other movies in recent memory that were similar to this. One is the Disney Pixar film Wall-E, where the first half of Wall-E was essentially a silent film, and then The Artist, which won Best Picture, and that was a silent film paying homage to old silent films of Hollywood yesteryear. Now, I think the soundtracks in both of those, the soundtrack and The Artist, was a main part of the film, and it had subtitles as well, but very few. And then Wall-E, the sound design was excellent. That helped frame the world. But Wall-E had a few exposition parts that it needed to, as well as this film. The sound design in this movie was excellent too, as well. And the creature designs were fantastic. They definitely don't shy away from it. It's not like um, they're afraid to show the monster even early on. And I thought the designs for that were excellent. There's one part in the movie that bothers me, and it's a scene early on. It's after the youngest son is killed, and in which John Krasinski takes his um, only remaining son out fishing, and they approach a waterfall, and he basically has to explain to his son how sound works and how if they're behind the waterfall, the louder sound drowns them out. So, and it shows them screaming. And I, I, I mean, I guess it's a little bit of a spoiler now, and I understand why they did it because it foreshadows to later on in the movie when Emily Blunt is in the basement and is essentially trapped behind kind of a makeshift waterfall, and a creature is in there and it can't hear her breathing because she's behind the waterfall, and it plays on that scene earlier with the sun. But I just find it hard to believe that he had never explained that to his son after a year and a half in this post-apocalyptic world with these creatures, and he's never explained to him how sound worked and how you could hide your sound away from them. Um, there were a few other parts that kind of bugged me. There was one part with a nail in the stairway on a step that the camera made it so obvious that somebody was going to step on it later in the movie. I mean, they had to zoom in on it for several seconds. Um, and then uh, another part in the movie was when they, once the creatures are attacking them at the end, because Emily Blunt is the one that steps on the nail, and it causes a series of events to have the creatures come to their home. After her baby is born, they go into the basement and put a mattress over top of the entranceway, and John Krasinski says that the creatures cannot hear them down there. I don't know why they didn't know that. I guess you wouldn't really want to test that out. I understand you don't want to go down there, put the mattress over top of it, and then start talking just in case it didn't work and then the creatures come and kill you. But I just find it hard to believe, or a little annoying, that they didn't know that, or even know that, like, they wouldn't have one of the other family members step outside and then someone go down the basement, put the mattress over, and make a small sound and see if they could even hear it. Anything like that. Because then they could go down there and do whatever they need to do to use sound. Um, Other than that, the movie had a lot of clever ways of signaling to each other. They had lights on their property that they switched from regular to red when someone was in trouble. Um, Other ways of eating without making sound and stuff like that. And hideouts to go. They poured sand on the trails on the walkway to cover their feet from making sound while instead of walking in the grass or in the fields or whatever. Um, so I thought there was definitely some clever ways, and Emily Blunt and John Krasinski gave great performances. I actually think he's a pretty good director. This isn't his first directorial or screenwriting debut, but this is his first that I've seen. And I think he does a pretty good job, actually. So there was a lot of praise around this movie, and there was a little bit of hate from some people that I knew surrounding this movie, especially concerning some of the dumb parts or lapse in logic in the movie. But I thought it was a very entertaining movie, especially the end sequence built a lot of tension up, and it definitely paid off in the end. And it also left a pretty big cliffhanger, and the plot was a lot more focused, a lot smaller in scope, which some of these post-apocalyptic movies tend to be so grand in scale. I think of World War Z, for example, where it's got to show the entire world and how it's affecting everything. And I like the smaller scope, how you don't know, they don't tell you, you don't know how it's affecting the world other than a few newspaper clippings. And one movie I can think of is the 2004 remake, or even the original Dawn of the Dead, how you see a band of survivors in a mall, but you don't really find out how the entire world is affected by the virus. You just see it from the eyes of the survivors. And this movie is the same kind of way. You only see what's happening through the eyes of this family and nobody else really. So I thought that was quite effective too. And I don't see the few people that had hate towards this movie. I don't really see that it's quite justified. I think it was. I mean, there are a few parts that bugged me, but for the most part, this was a solid movie again. But once again, like Hereditary, it was branded as a horror movie, and I didn't really find it scary at all. There were a few jump scares that were kind of earned, kind of not, kind of cheap a little bit, but for the most part, it was an effective movie, but not that scary. Um, I actually found Hereditary to be a little scarier than this, but I guess a sequel is already in the works because it did so well, both critically and commercially. So I don't know how they're going to do a sequel with this, but I'm a little curious to find out. I did hear a rumor that this film started out as a Cloverfield sequel, which seems to be a trend in Hollywood because all three of the Cloverfield movies aren't tied directly to each other, but just take place within the same universe. So I could see how this could be put into a Cloverfield universe. I'm glad that they didn't do it because that's almost getting annoying at this point. The last Cloverfield movie was absolute garbage. Um, and it doesn't need to be tied. Movies don't need to be in some cinematic universe at all times. You can have one off movies like this that are effective and, you know, made with, the quality made and just made with a good artistic eye. John Krasinski seems to understand the effect of this movie and what created tension and what would scare people. It didn't scare me, but would scare other people. And I hope they don't dilute it with sequels, but horror movies, when they do well, they tend to have sequels. Just look at Paranormal Activity or Friday the 13th and the 13th or the 12th sequel that they're on right now. So, but I would definitely recommend this movie. I would probably give it around a 7 out of 10 ballpark. So, thanks for listening to this edition of the Movie Mouth. Stay tuned for more episodes, and if you like the content, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment on the video. Thanks, guys. We'll see you.